Thanks everybody for listening. Stay tuned for Weev coming up on WFMU.
Leader of a movement, screaming hack the planet back in 99. Activism in its prime, global hell had the dot mill rooted. Alphabet soup and they troops in the suits, kid kicking down doors and seizing my equipment, blocking on my shipments, sitting on their hit list. Whole day radical, emphatic beat addict in the stab hit. I envelope the game, call me rabbit. Hop to hop, I run the internet equivocally. Bitch, I be hit him with the bite style symmetry. Digital gangster reppin' till I'm dead. Steady grip Apache logs when I'm looking for the feds. Fast forward, now the internet anonymous and captains of the lows boat raise the mass prominent, dominant hacks. And I sec on that new, dropping tables in my sequel like it was some poo-poo.
Pound and me sick,
pounding through your speakers.
Pound and me sick,
pounded to the bleachers.
Pound and me sick.
If you're sitting below deck in the lows boat, salute bitch and show some respect.
Pound and me sick,
pounding through your speakers.
Pound and me sick,
pounded to the bleachers.
Pound and me sick.
If you're sitting below deck in the lows boat, salute bitch and show some respect. Low sec bitch, they folk your hack Sony. Got the MD5, we rock your macaroni. Cook coke, crack, nimble like a noodle. Or HB, Gary, stay toast like a strudel. Brute shell on your bootstrap, now who's that? Buy the M join and drop your whole C-class. Yeah, C-class, it is evident we flousing. Iron cannon in the proc list, deep dousing. Lean back, bitch, we be sending an injection. Magic quotes off, join table intersection. Put it up on base, then it won't get erased. Then 20 million hits till you're down like some cavemen. Yeah, that's CNN. You want to interview? Send a brief message to the nickname Sabu. I'm IRC. Man, we convening in some 99. Throw back down screaming.
Pound and me sick,
pounding through your speakers.
Pound and me sick,
pounded to the bleachers.
Pound and me sick.
If you're sitting below deck in the lows boat, salute bitch and show some respect.
Pound and me sick,
pounding through your speakers.
Pound and me sick,
pounded to the bleachers.
Pound and me sick.
If you're sitting below deck in the lows boat, salute bitch and show some respect.
Hello, faithful listeners. It's a great Sunday morning, and we have about 3 hours to deliver you the gospel of the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm the Reverend Andrew Aurenheimer, and I'm here with Brother Joseph from our monastery in Schenectady.
Well, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brother Joseph. And we've got a long set here for you. It's all Christian, good Christian music. We've got some rock music representative of the Christian identity movement and some other affiliated Christian nationalist organizations. We've got some good Creative Commons licensed, various musics from the internet. Good Christian boys doing a community service for their people. And we hope to deliver you a great hour. We've got some politics coming up. We're going to read a little bit of speeches and things, and we'll take calls eventually, I'm sure. So you just heard YT Crackers, Pound Anti-Sec, and I don't know if y'all were paying attention in that, but he has this one line in there, Global Hell had the dot mill rooted. And if you're familiar with Global Hell, this was the sweetest hacker group. Like, back in the day, like, Global Hell had a wheel. They had a wheel, and it was like a color wheel, right? It was like a color wheel. And you could spin this wheel. And one of the outside of the color wheel was, like, nations, So it was like, there's Syria, there's Iran, there's Russia. And the inside was industries. So they'd land this wheel on, let's say it's like Russia and pharmaceuticals, and that week, everything pharmaceutical in Russia got owned. It was awesome. And eventually the wheel landed on U.S. and military, and that led to their undoing. But it's still really is the right time in the right place. There's all sorts of things now. There's IDS, and, everything is at least arguably more secure, I guess. I mean, you can't go out anymore with Esed Mendy and own every single Solaris box on the internet. You just can't do that kind of thing anymore. It's a shame, I suppose. But yeah. We just heard Mr. Spastic with Sloppy, and we're leading into some Saber Pulse with Hey Kate. I hope y'all enjoy the show.
I remember the day when we held hands and made that vow until death do us part. It was a time to be proud, but you wouldn't stay the test of faith and face the trouble that we face. Stay with a man who would make us stand for his country and his race. Now we each must make a choice and bear the burden of the consequence. But if you choose and you make a turn, you can bet we'll meet again across that fence. I'll stay true, have a chew until Victoria. I'll stay true, have a chew until Victoria. I'll stay true, have a chew until Victoria. I'll stay true. How about you? To all those in a jail, those persecuted for the cause, your actions were not in vain. Soon the light of freedom will shine again. And if you've lost your home, your job, or someone that you love, stand your ground, there's a place for you in the kingdom that's to come. I'll stay true, have a Jew until Victoria. I'll stay true, have a Jew until Victoria. I'll stay true, have a Jew until Victoria. I'll stay true. How about you? Now if you've heard that call, don't be afraid, we can never fall. That's a promise from above. Till his will, let it be done.
British soldier from Liverpool, just a boy of 19. IRA sniper's aim was true, the shot was showing clean. Masked metal orange, red hand commandos. Bomb 3 dead in a pub, revenge is all they know. Daddy's little girl, sent for milk by her mother, to be killed at age 12. The plastic bullet slays another. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald on the funerals through the years. Blood-stained emerald. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald on the funerals through the years. Blood-stained emerald. On the Irish in Northern Ireland, armored cars all around, and deadly bombs in London town. IRA, UDA, SAS, it's all a mess. Brothers with different names, playing Mason and commie games. It's whites killing whites, Catholic or Protestant, the same blood, the same face of the beautiful Celtic race. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald on the funerals through the years. Blood-stained emerald. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald on the funerals through the years. Blood-stained emerald. settle the church divisions. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald. All fuels through the years, blood-stained emerald. The children weep the tears of a blood-stained emerald. All fuels through the years, blood-stained emerald. The harps and pipes echo in Belfast and Derry City. Once foes now come together, racial kinsmen are forever. Irish unity, Christian unity, Irish unity is white unity, white unity.
Screw you! like you. Now I've read your stories. I just said screw you. Screw you. Straight into the truth. Screw you. It wasn't all word. Screw you. And I'm a glad rock. Screw you. To us it's just absurd. You claim you're speaking for the people. Exactly which ones do you mean? A berry on your head, red star upon your collar. You don't talk for people on the streets. Oh no, screw you. Strangers in the truth, screw you. It's just an all word, screw you. And I'm a good one, screw you. What's a different dress, screw you. Strangers in the truth, screw you. It's just an all word, screw you. And I'm a good one, screw you. What's a different dress, screw you. Country down on the face of our nation, there seems to be a frown. Once we were all proud men of this green and pleasant land, 'cause we've lost a lot of tears over you. Pretty soon the night will come, our nation's doom will toll. They bought up all our industry, they tried to buy our souls. Now a nation's working man is just a rich man's slave, 'cause we've lost a lot of tears over you. Well, it's power from profit, they're buying our souls. Power from profit, put you on the dole. Power from profit, a good job's hard to find. Power from profit, they'll soon own our minds. I think it's time our people stood together all as one. To back all our nation's wealth and the pocketeers have gone. A country then would be finally paid for all our sweat and toil. Yes, we've lost a lot of tears over you. Well, it's power from profit, they're buying our souls. Power from profit, put you on the dole. Power from profit, a good job's hard to find. Power from profit, they'll soon own our minds. There's power, there's profit, that capitalists they think. Anybody stands against them better stay out of our reach. We will fight against them with a hammer and a gun. When our people start to rise, the traitors' time will come. There's power from profit, they're buying our souls. Power from profit, put you on the dole. Power from profit, good jobs are to find. Power from profit, they'll soon own our minds. When our time is finally come, we've gained our brave new world. The people stand in hell and dawn, the banners are unfurled. We got to be on guard to see that they don't come again, 'cause we've lost a lot of tears over you. But it's power from profit, they're buying our souls. Power from profit, put you on the dole. Power from profit, a good job's hard to find. Power from profit, they'll soon own our minds. Power from profit, they're buying our souls. Power from profit, put you on the dole. Power from profit, a good job's hard to find. Power from profit, they'll soon own our minds.
That was a long set of Day of the Sword there. Just to let you know, that was the lead singer of that band, Scott Steadfern, is actually serving a long series of prison sentences in relation to a series of armored car robberies he made for the Aryan Republican Army. And you can't say that the man doesn't truly believe everything he says. And whether you object to some of his political viewpoint or not, that song, that Power from Profit song, is hauntingly reminiscent of many of the central issues of our day revolving around Occupy Wall Street. And I don't know. I think everybody, regardless of creed or race, needs to stand up against the international banker and teach them a lesson. Scott Steadford's federal prisoner number is 498-48066. I recommend that you would deposit $1 or $2 on his commissary, his prison commissary. He's a decent man. You know, he fought for a cause he believed in, whether that cause was right or not. And we should have, more people in America that are willing to stand up for the things they believe in. There's a couple other tracks of his Federal Mafia and Big Brother. I can't play them, unfortunately. They violate station policies and probably something from the FCC. But, we're taking calls, apparently, 201-209-9368. And I welcome your feedback on Day of the Sword. That was a long set, starting with I'll Stay True. Then following that, Nothing Is What It Seems, Bloodstained Emerald, After the Fire, Screw You, and of course, Power from Profit. A good job's hard to find. Power from Profit, they'll soon own our minds. Got a long set of chip tunes here for a minute. I'd like to read some speech later on some very, easygoing topics such as abortion and birth control and the fallacies of a nation that embraces these barren ideas. So stay tuned. I mean, we're gonna have a lot of fun tonight. I promise. I've also just been informed that the comments on this show at WFMU.org are now available. I welcome your comments. You can tweet at me, you can post on the WFMU comments, and I will talk back, most assuredly. Most assuredly. I love you all. God bless. I'm told we have a lot of listeners from the United Kingdom, and I'd just like to tell them that not enough of them showed up to vote for Nick Griffin and the elections of the BNP this year. I think that you all need to show up in record numbers for 2012 to put that great and honorable man, Nick Griffin, in his office once again. Don't let it be by a narrow margin. You want to say for the future of Europe, for the future of your nation, that you want Nick Griffin and BNP office for all eternity. Thank you. with a message to revolutionary women and girls around the world. All of you in Anonymous, all of you in the Occupy movement, I come to plead with you on an issue that affects the future, the very future and fabric of our nation. When Americans come together today to discuss the things that concern us, both as individuals and as a nation, it is a solemn occasion, whether we wish it to be or not. During the political struggles of the past, we could speak of national attitudes or of civilization without any involvement of our soul. Now we have forgotten how to approach an issue merely with our understanding, merely with our mouth, merely with our heart. We have become a whole people once again. When we speak with others, we do so with our full being. That is what makes the occupation strong and great and powerful from its first days. It is also that which the enemy, both domestic and foreign, cannot understand, and which it hates with a deadly strength. As this great and beautiful people's movement began, so also began a hard and bitter struggle between enemy and free forces, between an old world that is really long dead and buried and the new world that is struggling to reach the light through us. This struggle has been going on in people's hearts and souls for years and is nowhere near its end. The world finds it difficult to understand that which it is the center of our endeavors. The value of blood and heritage. Our enemies first laughed in pity, then in hatred as we spoke of it. Let us speak of what we liberty advocates mean by that, so that it will become clear why the American woman may be even more concerned about these matters than the man, his state, and his fighting organization can be. There was a time in the past when we were untrue. Untrue in the deepest sense. We were untrue not to other people, or parties, or states, or kings, but untrue to something far greater, untrue to the laws of life. As long as the world exists, as long as life grows, flourishes, and perishes, so long will this life have the urge to live on in the future and win new territory, whether plant or animal or man, as we or I or you. Wherever there is life, it has the longing to bring forth new life. It should be unnecessary to speak of such things. We speak of them only because for a few decades a crazy era ignored, blasphemed, and mocked these greatest, most beautiful, and purest dreams of life. This was an age that made the idol of money supreme and said the world should not be governed by what serves life, but rather what some idiot of an accountant or stockbroker or greedy retail banker decides is best. We know, and we can see the results. The great laws of life were evaluated according to money sacks and checkbooks. When we think back on our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, there were many children in the house. It may have been crowded and hard financially, but we were happy. Perhaps because there were so many of us and so large a family. But the time came when the people said, as man or woman, as parents or teachers of leaders, you have the duty to show the people the way to a better future. That better future, people thought, could only come from a future richer in money. A future in which the individual had more material wealth. And when they were asked where this money would come from, a false teaching arose in the last century. The fewer people there are, the more an individual child can inherit from his parents. He who loves his children and wishes a prosperous future for his nation should therefore see to it that America's population is small, and that only a few children continue the family after he is gone. This was the terrible teaching of birth control which Marxism preached and the bourgeois followed. No one dared stand against it. That was the doctrine that made us what we are today, a dying people, in which fewer American children of American stock, I'm talking American children whose grandparents were Americans, fewer and fewer are born each year, in which today more Western people die each year than Western people are born. A future in which foreign cultures continue to balkanize our country and catalyze a wave of globalization that leads to shrinking American upward mobility, shrinking American industrial production, shrinking American quality of life. A future where all innovation and technological development is done in foreign nations. I see this in my own field. Everything is outsourced to morons. I mean, anybody that has taken a look at code from these nations knows why these nations are terrible, filthy places. It's obvious. Our innovation is superior as a people and as a culture. And if you think otherwise, you're simply wrong. You're blinded by liberal lies, filthy liberal lies. There is no greater America in this country than the vile, scheming liberal. And if you look now, all the patents for OLEDs, all these technologies that power your smartphones and your iPads, more and more of them every year are Korean patents, Japanese patents. The innovation of America is sinking, and it is because the innovation of Americans' population decreases proportionally with its size. These destructive ideas were supposed to lead to a happy future. But happiness among our parents' generation was only thought about in terms of possession. It was not thought about in terms of culture or ideas or Western attitudes. It was therefore inherently false. But even in its own terms, it was false. For it forgot something. When a people begins to die, when a people no longer obeys the laws of life, when a people values money more than its existence and posterity, this people is on the path to disaster, both historically and politically. Within a few decades, it will be dead. oppressed by other peoples who are stronger, closer to life, and who follow life's laws better than we. Surely we can see it in Europe, where Western peoples are being outbred 8-1. Surely we can see it in America, where what defined an American a century ago is largely disappearing due to heavy immigration and a class of indigenous welfare-addicted leeches that will surely outbreed any working class families in this country. If present trends continue, by the end of our lives, America will be a nation with almost no inhabitants which respect the system of freedoms, the system of laws, the system of common decency that formed the foundations of Western civilization. And we know that those across the seas, in China, in India, even in Mexico, other peoples are growing quickly and strongly. Sooner or later, these other peoples will come in conflict with a shrinking and withering American populace, and the result of the supposed doctrine of happiness stemming from abortion and birth control and permissive and lascivious sexual attitudes will be a hard and bitter national death for our children. Those that believed that they could possibly give their children a happy and peaceful future by reducing the number of children erred deeply. They give the children only the promise of a hard and bitter struggle for the United States' existence as a state and as an idea. Today we work against the tide of a police state to show people that the ideas of yesterday are false. We must also ensure that people understand that the state and nation cannot do without the ideas of the family, that the family must also ensure that it produces children, for it cannot exist without them. That when we can not only provide economic support to make it easier to begin families and to have Western children, but also to tell people again and again of the sanctity of life and the necessity of continuing our people into the future. Our enemies on both sides of the border suddenly have insults and hateful things to say about us. They wish to disturb our work. Suddenly, there are voices saying that life-affirming doctrines are inhumane, they are barbaric, they are against civil liberties, that life affirmation turns people into breeding animals, that it just inhibits the freedom of women to act like lascivious whores. I say that it is the duty of men and women to continue the eternal chain of life, a chain that begins in the distant past where our forefathers fought and died for our freedom, and continues into the future where we claim victory, where we claim security for our offspring and their offspring. A chain of which we are only a link. We have an obligation to that past and that future not to break that chain. But our enemies, the vile, despicable liberals, both foreign and domestic, say that we reject the dignity and the value of humanity. that life affirmation holds that men and women have to follow an external morality imposed on the sexual organs of us all. Well, let me tell you, when you murder a baby, you impose your morality on a lot more than its genitals. Make no mistake. When you murder a baby, you are damned to hell for all eternity. It is a shame that we have to respond to such vile liberals. But it is necessary because of the valuable freedoms that our ancestors fought and died for. It's part of the Western process that these vile, despicable harlots and Johns, these men and women that support these permissive attitudes, be able to out themselves in public so that we may treat them with the scorn and derision they deserve. My response is, you are mistaken in accusing us of thinking that the only purpose of humanity is to continue the species by passing on our blood to future generations. We know the other values. We support them and find them wherever we can, those values that the individual shows in his work and selfless service. We know well enough that each person lives a double life. The first is the life he lives between birth and death. We are to do as much as we can to make this life rich, to accomplish that which is good and beautiful, because we know that faith without works is indeed dead. We must use our strengths, our gifts, our aptitudes. We must use them for the benefit of others. That is the duty of the individual. But as a person, you are something more. You are a member of the chain of life, a drop in a great, endless bloodstream of your people. Therefore, you have duties and obligations before the eternity of the nation. You have the duty to pass on what you received from your parents, your ancestors, those who put down their lives for these freedoms that you hold so dear now. Are you going to waste them? These men and women that fought in Europe against the Saracen hordes, these grandparents of ours that fought in World War II for democratic liberty? Are you going to waste away your youth in nightclubs and amusement parks and movie theaters? Let me tell you what the afterlife is like. I can tell you because I've been and I've come back. I've come back to tell you the truth. When you die, you're in a theater and a movie's playing. And this movie is the sum of your life. Everything that you've ever done is on this movie. And if it's a great movie, if it has a meaning, if it has a message, if it has a great ending, if it's worth watching, be it a comedy or a tragedy or a great noble historical epic, if your story has value, you'll never get bored of it. It's a great story. It's a compelling movie. How many times have I watched City Lights by Chaplin? Probably a million. I mean, I've watched It's a Wonderful Life by Capra probably innumerable numbers of times. And I know I could never tire of these movies. These are great and heroic epics of American tradition. And just like that, when you die, is your movie good? Is your movie worth watching? Or is it meaningless tripe? Do you drift from nightclub to bar to amusement park over and over in meaningless succession, making absolutely nothing of your whole life? Do you burn out in your 30s or your 40s when you are no longer beautiful? Do you cry because you have no children and face a meeker and bleaker future every day? No longer able to get your jollies in the local pub every night? I bet some of you do. And you know why you did? Partially because of birth control, because you got addicted to the act of sex in a manner that demeaned you as a person, that lessened you, that left you tapping at a lever like a rat in a cage, tapping that cocaine lever over and over again until it overdoses and dies. You have died a death already, and this death is sole and final. But God can save you. There's time. There's time to make meaning of your life. And you owe it. You owe it to the generations before. When you die and you go to that great theater in the sky, you owe it to make it a great and powerful movie. A movie that you'll want to watch for the rest of your days. If it's a bad movie now, find redemption and make it a good ending, and you can still make it to heaven. I do not believe that such behavior, which obeys both the laws and reason of life, is barbaric or hateful or inhumane. Nay, nay, I find it wonderful that we could act in the light of God, that we could fight unjust powers like Occupy SF tonight being raided right now by despicable police at the instruction of federal authorities. This practice is not barbaric. I believe instead that the barbarism is to be found in the years we have left behind us, where any dirty lout could besmirch the most valuable, holy life of a man or woman in their families, or drag children through the filth without anyone defending their culture against such an attack. I believe that when we tell people once more of the great value of blood and remind them they have duties not only for the 65.5-year span in which they work and serve, but also to the millennia of the past from which we come and the millennia of the future to which we are heading, then we are giving them higher values than those of yesterday. Let me say also, however, that it is wrong if someone thinks that only those who found families and bear children are valuable to our state. We know that is not so. We know there are reasons why some people leave their people's flow of blood. We know that some are denied what the nation places great value on. We do not ignore them or think ourselves their betters. We only say this: my friend, you and I must do our duty to our people. And when we cannot fulfill it in one way, then we must do what we can with even greater energy and devotion. Because when you do your duty, you are one of us. We extend our hand to you. We honor your humanity and service for America. Let us work together so that in the future, as many people as possible will be able to serve this great nation. That is a piece of the thinking of blood and heritage that God has taught us. And there's another aspect. When we see people today, we can recognize that we are not all alike. There are differences in value. Each person does not have the same value as anyone else. In the past, people believed that differences were superficial, the result of the environment in which one grew up. People believed that what became of a person depended primarily on the house he grew up in, or in his social environment, or the class he came from. Did he go to Yale? Was his daddy a doctor? They believed that a person born in a slum, surrounded by shadows, troubles, poverty, a child lacking in love and affection, could only become a second-class human being, a physically and psychologically ill member of the society. Someone failed by the society and state. One thought that a child growing up in such a slum inevitably became sick or even criminal. It was because he grew up in a poor environment. The Marxists claimed that if every child in America grew up in an environment that gave him all he needed, he would inevitably become a useful, decent, upright, proud, and honest adult. After a few years or decades, the entire American people would consist of such decent and useful people. And so, through Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and the Department of Education, we built a great experiment in welfare state, one previously executed by other empires to utter failure. But we thought we were better, and it has devoured 2/3 of our nation's budget supporting these decadent and useless programs. In the past, people believed the environment was responsible, even when such a person failed miserably. But we knew through adoption studies that the majority of intelligence is inherited, that only a quarter comes from nurture. We recall the days of delirium when millions of unemployed had been thrown on the street by a sick political and economic system made superfluous. Violence in our society has skyrocketed, and murderers seem to walk amongst us at alarming rates. Some of the wolves we support go on sprees of raping innocent women. And what did the world of yesterday, what does the world of today say?
He can't help himself. He is a victim of circumstances. He has Beethoven's hands and an autistic temperament. We need not put him on the gallows or in prison to protect us and our children. No, this poor soul is only sick because of his environment. Put him in a modern sanitarium. Give him everything he needs to put him in touch with better things. In a few years, this mass rapist of 30 people will leave an ideal human being, so pure and innocent that one could put him in charge of grade schoolers.
That's what liberals think now. It is. They would have us release the most depraved criminals this world has ever seen back to the streets to rape and murder further. I have no doubt in my mind. That seems like a bad joke to reasonable and rational people, a crazy fantasy. But it stands now, a government policy in this nation. Those who did well under such policies and have joined to fight us think that they can accuse our doctrines of blood and heritage as barbaric. Why can we see things differently? Because we have learned something. In the end, you are not as important and significant as you thought yesterday. Your strength, your abilities are not as great as you believed during the liberal era. Oh yes, it was a lovely dream to sit around and say, I will do with my life what I want. And if I happen to be a teacher, I will teach what I want and do what I enjoy and I think right and what my hormones tell me to do and what the television tells me to do. We were taught that we were beautiful and unique snowflakes capable of anything. Well, that was your idea of the environment. We are a bit more modest, a bit more humble before the laws of fate. We have learned that what I can do for myself, or what you can do for yourself, or what we all can do to each other, is not as important or as deep as that which a greater power has already done to us. It is that power that even before our birth gave us a part of our nature and laid out our path for us in the world. Here are joined two things: the knowledge of modern science and the sensitivity and understanding of a humble person. Suddenly we see that what you are, what I am, and what I can be in my life is in part predetermined by the traits that which I have inherited. If my aptitude is good and strong, and I am true to it and develop what is within me, my life will be successful and perhaps of benefit and joy to others. If such an inheritance is denied me, or if for some inexplicable reason fate has given me to other, perhaps weak, perhaps even bad traits, I can struggle against them for my entire life, and will still not be able to rid myself of that which slumbers in me because of the actions of a higher power. Or perhaps just a predestination. We see that a good part of a people's history is determined by what it has inherited through genetic succession. If we ask what sorts of physical or intellectual traits these may be, or what groups there are, we will see that each people has three groups.
The first is a large group of people with average gifts, the most of us, who are able to deal with the normal problems life presents us with. Next, there is a very small group. This group has received a better inheritance than most of us, not because of any particular virtue on their part, but simply because of fate and breeding. The leaders of humanity, those who build states or touch the soul, they come from this group. And there's a third group, a small group with particular traits, also not their fault. Those who are sick and genetically defective. They are not up to the challenges of life and need the outside help of the state to survive. As humanity or a nation go through the centuries, the decisive fact is which of these three groups is the strongest. One might say, that is not a question at all. The strongest will win. The group from which the leaders come. This superior group has to be the strongest in the end, and it must gradually have its way. Well, that's how things would be in nature. If people with their little brains did not believe that they could change the laws of life given to the world by heaven. Man has interfered in these matters. He has tried to change the laws of struggle and existence and selection. So many liberals believe in the blatant lie of evolution. And they aren't even coherent in their own ideologue, because for evolution to work, there must be a large selection pool, and some specimens must be selected against. That's a fact. And yet they want to have small families. They want less babies, and they want less selection. I mean, they oppose the death penalty, for Christ's sake. It just doesn't make sense. And of course it doesn't make sense, because the liberal is not a creature of reason. But nor is he a creature of faith. The liberal is a creature of reaction. A sign of inevitable decay. These were the ancient laws of life. Struggle and existence and selection, to which all men and women too were subject. And the consequence has been around for time immemorial, and we have tried to reject it. But that which cannot meet the challenges must die. And that's hard. Nobody wants to admit it. But that's also the way that nature makes life stronger and better. Man has tried more and more to abolish these laws. He has kept life going by using artificial means in cases where, left to itself, it would have ended. Did you know that Dick Cheney has no pulse? He has no heartbeat? He has some sort of mechanical pump which provides an endless stream of blood flow. He is an undead warlock. He has surpassed feeding upon the flesh of the living. He now sucks at the very black blood of Gaia itself. He has used all his understanding. Man has all his love and his sympathy to keep a person alive, even when it is no joy, but only a burden and misery. We now keep millions of unhappy creatures alive through artificial means, be it aid of food, aid of medicine, or a breathing device. A horrific mockery of the sanctity of life to keep someone alive. A life to whom has been denied the right to life. But keeping them alive was not itself the problem. What was the worst is that they were given the opportunity to pass on their unfortunate physical and mental characteristics. That was the worst that happened. We took the physically weak, the mentally ill, the genetically defective criminals, and not only kept them alive and care for them. That is our duty as human beings, which we certainly do not want to ignore in the future. And gave them the ability to have children with the same deficiencies, thus doubling or multiplying their misery. The American people do not yet know the extent of this misery. It does not know the depressing spirit of the homes where thousands of defectives live their lives only being fed and cared for. Poor creatures who are worse than any animal. The animal, at least, is as it should be. These poor creatures are distortions of life, no joy either to themselves or others. They are a burden throughout their miserable existences, but thanks to the selfless care and devotion of those who care for them, they may live 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. The American people do not realize the enormous sums that have been spent for decades, money that is taken from those who are healthy, who could do something useful, but cannot, because the money is lacking. I think we all remember Nadia Suleman, dubbed Octomom by the liberal media. Creative of a broken home of refugee stock, she saved up a six-figure sum of money so that she could have IVF treatments from her disability payments, and thus made herself a fatherless litter of crotch droppings. The outcome of this kind of self-destructive welfare state should be clear to anyone. These hordes of filthy degenerates will eat our nation alive and make violent conflict a necessity, should we not reform the state right now. But I am not speaking of this as a kind of theft. Money is not an end in itself. Rather, we have committed a theft of spirit and soul because we tried to persuade the nation and humanity that our own greatness could come from sacrificing for the worst and the least functional. In the end, we have gone so far as to put the sick and dying before the young, strong, healthy, and promising. That is against nature. That is against life. And the only people that it could possibly serve is a cabal of international bankers who want us to be weak, who want us to be overrun, so that they can steal the great wealth of our nation. A nation going this way is heading for the abyss. We went so far as to preach year after year to healthy families that they should have no children, or at most one. Else they sinned against the nation in the spirit of this so-called enlightened age. But if some ugly imbecile of a whore and a genetically ill criminal had children, though they were not only a financial burden for their entire lives, but also took the labor of people whom society gave nothing better to do than to change these poor creatures 3 times a day and feed them. That is a perversion of everything great and healthy, and is a sin against life and the spirit of creation. With full knowledge of our duties as human beings and the requirements of pity, we made the decision not to allow such miserable creatures to pass on their misery to the next generation. And we can make that decision again. Because if we do not, they will multiply and multiply and multiply. And our children and their children will suffer for it. I know that there are those who would say, you are meddling in matters that are not your concern. You are interfering in an area outside human control. Life and death are not in the hands of man, but in those of a higher power. If God wants sick and genetically ill people to be born, you may not interfere through laws, operations, or any other measures with God's will. And if you do so, and you have with your law to prevent inherited illness, then you are acting against the will of God, and you are heretics. Well, to those I say, my friend, you are wrong. It is true that we are subject to a higher power. We humans may never interfere with the great laws of the Creator. But you are wrong. See the laws the Creator has established for His world and your life. The great law is that life must be able to preserve itself, and that if it cannot, it will collapse. It is the hard, brutal law of the struggle for existence and of selection and extinction. It was the law we saw day by day, hour by hour, under all the clouds of heaven and all the stars of the sky, in which life seemed to find a senseless death, whether plant or animal or person, whether in distant Africa or India or China or near us, here in the United States. That which cannot meet the challenges of life dies, no matter how much pain it causes. And even if your small understanding or mind cannot comprehend it, these are the great laws of life and of the world that God Himself gave us. These are laws, my American friend, that in our crazy fantasies we broke in the past. With overwhelming human pride and false pity, we broke the great law and kept those alive who, under the laws of God, would have long since perished. Today, we must encourage these old laws using humane methods, for they follow a more hard and brutal course in nature, according to God's will. We are doing nothing more than attempting to re-establish the laws of creation and bowing to the heavenly order. We are thus showing piety and true humility. You liberals are the heretics. This applies as well to the third and last principle of our thinking. The third and last principle is that the people on this world in any locality are different in both body and soul. They are not equal, as yesterday's lie had it. People are different. They are different in the depths of their hearts and natures, and their aptitudes and capabilities, and in their abilities for good and evil. Maybe we could argue these differences were accidental, the result of climate or civilization, and that one could overcome these differences and create a unified man and a unified state in which all would be equally happy. We have learned that the differences between the major cultures of the world are not the result of human action, but of the laws of creation. We have learned that the lines between culture, soul, and spirit cannot be blurred. We have learned that the opposite of the old adage, "What God has brought together, let no man put asunder," is also true. We have learned what God has localized, no man should globalize. History has shown it beneficial to have more than one culture on the earth. Different kinds, various cultures. This is a part of the beautiful symphony that was creation. We bow before this truth. We respect the sovereignty of other countries. It is only in the interest of the international banker to have all our cultures devoured by the consumer monoculture. I've been to Spain twice in my life. My first trip to Catalonia was a rich, fulfilling experience, I'm talking. It was fused with the spirit of Antonin Gaudi. And it was set to a soundtrack of flamenco performers lining the streets. After the great success of the European Union, after a great debt which Spain began having to pay, you notice that many of the things that made Spain Spain have just sort of tapered off. You go back and there are the spoiled, privileged kids, and they're all wearing Gucci or Lagerfeld. And the mediocre are wearing the Gap. And there's no more appreciation for history or culture. There's not even people playing flamenco in the streets. You know what they're playing? Well, they ask for money. They're playing Michael Jackson. They're playing Britney Spears. They're playing Oasis. Such is the death of a nation at the hands of globalization. And it happens here, too. I was a child. I grew up in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. And they were filled with the hum of bluegrass in most every city. And now pretty much the only place that you could possibly find a decent bluegrass performance on a weekend is maybe Eureka Springs. My home of Fayetteville, Arkansas, has just been... It's been eaten alive. It's got Section 8 housing in it now. The rape rate has skyrocketed. It's no longer the place that it was, even in my short lifetime. It's been a blink of the eye. And one of the nicest places I've ever lived is on its way to becoming its own Detroit. And this is the inevitable decay of a culture due to the welfare state and consumerism. We must, as a people, band together to stop this vicious assault on the future of our nation and people. We must identify the culprit of this assault as a permissive attitude in regards to sex and childbirth that is the direct result of the imposition of birth control and abortion upon our society. We must unite as a people to wipe this plague off the face of the earth. I call upon you, all the women and girls with revolutionary spirit in their hearts, to first radicalize themselves and then radicalize your fellow sisters. I call upon you to stand up for the future of your heritage and culture, to do whatever is necessary to promote the propagation of Western life. We must not forget the collapse of previous empires that were overrun by hordes of peoples of other cultures. We must not allow the final gasp of our nation to be when the invading armies come to murder the last Western man living in his parents' basement watching anime and browsing 4chan. I want you and all your female friends to go out there and breed like mad women. Produce hordes of children. Teach them the classic Western values that permeated our society and make them angry. Make them angry for their liberty. Teach them if they can't shoot a rifle at a tannerite charge on a polygamous compound on a fistful of blotter LSD, then they are not free. They are not living a life worth living. And then they should fight. Fight for that dream. That kind of insurmountable liberty that is the right, the God-given right of every man, woman, and child in the United States of America. Breed, damn you. You can start in my place. It's just an offer. Let us then together follow the path to a new worldview. Let us go the path of culture and heritage, which does not ignore faith and knowledge and a sense of higher powers. Let us go this path, not a path of matter, superstition, and heresy, but rather a path of deep humility and piety before the laws of God. Let us go along this path together and listen to the deepest depths where spirit and soul rule. Let us draw from there the strength to build the state, and even more important, the people. America today, in this Occupy movement, has the fortune to find a new way, led by a great and powerful idea. American women today have the good fortune to see a strong and loyal woman being birthed anew from the blazing fires, baptized by fires of the spirit of the Occupy movement. Let us go forward, hand in hand, as befits comrades building the future. And let us join the strength of men and women, rooted deep in their culture, to build what the world has never before seen. A new nation of the American soul. So, if you guys haven't heard, Occupy SF rated tonight, 100%. Brutalized. Stuff is going down for sure, and I'd like to take a moment to talk about, like I'm sure everybody listening has seen the video of the UC Davis protest with the tear gas. Like the people are on the ground, their arms are interlocked, no threat at all. This horde of cops just comes up and one steps forward and just sprays these people with tear gas. No provocation whatsoever. There is no conflict. There is no shouting. There is nothing. And I want to highlight to all of you something very important, is that these people are criminal terrorists. Make no mistake. These people are a graver threat to our liberties than any Al-Qaeda extremist. And it's the duty of every Christian out there to fight the forces of the international banker wherever they may rise. It is your God-given duty. If you neglect this duty, you cannot possibly call yourself a Christian. What would Christ do if he were alive? Let me tell you what he would do. Go read John. He went into the temple and he took the money changers and he flogged them. Let there be no mistake. There is no room for anything less than total resistance to oppression within the Christian framework. You must fight with all your life. I did a video a while back that a bunch of people have seen. I just had a caller, call in and tell me, he learned about me through this video. I talked about Occupy Wall Street a little bit, and I was talking about cheese in the video. I was talking about you cannot make cheese in America like they have in Europe for thousands of years. True fact. If you make cheese that is too young, you can be raided by a SWAT team just for making the same cheese that's been made in Europe for thousands of years. And I mean, this cheese is less lethal statistically than fava beans. No joke. Why are fava beans legal and peanuts legal, but cheese not? And let me tell you what it is, that they want the ability to control the food supply. They want to make sure that we are not able to feed ourselves the way we've fed ourselves for thousands of years, because then they can turn off the food and we will be unable to eat. We will be unable to even farm because our guts will not be prepared for cheese as it is meant to be eaten. let me tell you, I can eat all sorts of delicious raw meat. I'm talking raw chicken, I'm talking young cheese, and these things are generally okay to eat if you have been prepared and you're used to eating things as nature intended. And frankly, it should be like cigarettes. You know, I smoke now like a madman, and there's a warning on a pack of cigarettes, and there ain't, you know, even my grandmother knew that cigarettes were harmful. She eventually got lung cancer, but she didn't fool herself for 1 second into thinking, hey, these are a nutritional supplement. Even Mark Twain talks of them as an unhealthy vice. And Tom Sawyer, when Huckleberry Finn teaches Joe Harper and Tom Sawyer how to smoke, he's talking about it there. Everybody has always known that smoking is unhealthy. Let's not kid ourselves. And I know that if I eat young cheese, theoretically, there's a risk of listeria. And you know what? It's delicious. I ain't going to give up my cheese. I want my young camembert. I want it. I would go to war for that alone. And horse meat. Have you ever had some horse sashimi, some basashi? The Japanese make this. Oh, man, you have no idea. It's so good. I don't know. I like my cheese. And it's just that simple. I'm not willing to give it up. You know, I will fight, if nothing else, for the cheese. Here's some white tea cracker.
Yeah, STC, bitch. Straight sickness, bitch, more butter than a biscuit. They call me that mighty whitey Trisket. I drop cuts like barbers, perennial hits on bandwidth, like DOS attacks in the mix. My proxies pile up, a mile up when they shut my servers down and I switch my style up. Can't stop me, AOL, I'm in your town square. You can see me spamming, but it don't stop there. My dollars to cents, clicks to presidents. My brain's so programmatic, automatic intelligence. I keep my logic handy when the people get demandy. Throw them out a link and they eat it up like candy. My hustle binary, 0 and 1. Represent that city, the city where I'm from. Spell it backwards, that's YTC. CITY is an alias to me. I give a fuck about these antis, the mission always fails. Trying to throw these spammers in the federal jails, but we keep our methods slamming and we stay a step ahead. Praying to the spam god, giving us our daily bread. No love. No love, no love, no love. Ain't no love in the heart of time. No love, no love. I answer your questions like what is spam? More than a canned meat, it's a way of life, man. How you think I get green like the Incredible Hulk? It's because I'm sending the incredible bulk. My MX is in Texas, spam both sexes. Check my P.O. box, cause it's where my checks is. If you know me, then you know I like the wire. To show me the money like Jerry Maguire. Rim with the tire on my radio flyer. More money in the bank than fags in the Shire. Call me Gandalf the Grey. Wizardry is my pedigree. Every time I mail relay. Headers disappear like Florida votes. Whether you're prone to the bone or the party goats. Spamming 2K4 and we ain't gon' quit. Pushing these advertising killer bits. What? STC, God, Flow, where you at? Ain't no love in the heart of time. Ain't no love in the heart of the city. Ain't no love in the heart of time. Ain't no love in the heart of the city. Ain't no love in the heart of time. Ain't no love.
So it is when you're soldiers. Am I dancing like a madman to RAC bands in the studio? Yes, I am.
one guy. I've got no money. I'm not important. I'm not from a rich person family. But somehow I can still have an effect that I can quantify in the market, and you can too. There's nothing particularly special about any of us, but together we can form a movement that changes things.
So I'd like to respond to a comment from WTF Man. It says, quote, "Evil liberals? What is this? This is stupid. Stop talking politics, man. This is for music. Stop doing the politics." Unquote. Sir, for one, I censored the vulgarity of your comment because it reflects poorly upon your character. And I don't want to present you as a poor character. And secondly, if you don't like the things that I say, you should go to a place like Iran or Israel or Russia or the People's Republic of China, or take your pick of states around the world where a decent man cannot speak his piece in public, and go there. Go away. Get out of my country. You're not worth it to even have a citizen like you here. You should leave. You got it? Thanks. We've got another one from Larry that says, "You must be joking, right? If I want to hear this anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic garbage, I'll watch Fox News. I do not support WFMU to hear the same hogwash I hear on any given local commercial AM radio station. Firstly, I never said anything about God's chosen people of the Jews. I am nothing but a friend to the Jewish people. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I have no problem, and I find a struggle that I share with Israel, and that they too are at risk of being overrun by external forces, and I identify with their struggle. I am a supporter of the state of Israel. I am not an anti-Semite. I am not racist. I think that all peoples of the world deserve to have their culture intact. I find it despicable when America comes in with guns to other people's nations and tries to impose their ideology for their gain. It's terrible. It's terrible. I believe that all people in the world deserve the basic freedom and liberty that God has given us. And I am not even remotely comparable to Fox News. You will not hear anything revolutionary on Fox News. You certainly won't hear cops that pepper spray protesters described as criminal terrorists, which they are. I mean, let's face it. I'm not comparable to those corporate shills. They are servants of the international banker, and they should have action taken against them. I mean, they are literally a criminal enterprise. I mean, Murdoch is practically a mob boss. I mean, the whole phone hacking scandal is pretty clear. You know, that they have no regard for the law or basic human decency. They broke into the voicemails of 9/11 victims. I mean, they should be punished, and they should be reduced to non-existence over at Fox News. But I doubt you'll find somebody like me on a local commercial AM radio station. And once again, if you don't like what I say, I mean, come get a slot at FMU, right? Right? Come volunteer here, get a slot, speak your piece, you know, call me names on the air as long as they're compliant with FCC regulations. You know, stop being so, you know, authoritarian. I mean, I thought the WFMU listener base was better than this. You know, I thought that we supported liberty and freedom. Someone just said, "You have a soothing radio voice, dude. It's making me kind of hard." And I would say, purge such sinful thoughts from your mind, lest you be turned to a pillar of ash by our righteous and unforgiving Lord. I'd like to read you all a story. It's by a man named Ted Kaczynski. It's called Ship of Fools. Once upon a time, the captain and the mates of a ship grew so vain in their seamanship, so full of hubris and so impressed with themselves that they went mad. They turned the ship north and sailed until they met with icebergs and dangerous floes, and they kept sailing north into more and more perilous waters, solely in order to give themselves opportunities to perform ever more brilliant feats of seamanship. As the ship reached higher and higher latitudes, the passengers and crew became increasingly uncomfortable. They began quarreling among themselves and complaining of the conditions under which they lived. "Shiver me timbers," said an able seaman. "If this ain't the worst voyage I have ever been on. The deck is slick with ice, and when I'm on lookout, the wind cuts through me like a jacket, like a knife. And every time I reef the foresail, I blame near freeze me fingers, and all I get for it is a miserable 5 shillings a month." "You think you have it bad," said a lady passenger. "I can't sleep at night for the cold. Ladies on the ship don't get as many blankets as the men. It isn't fair." A Mexican sailor chimed in. "Chingado, I'm only getting half the wages of the Anglo seamen." All seamen. "We need plenty of food to keep us warm in this climate, and I'm not getting my share. The Anglos get more. And the worst of it is paddling a canoe on a nice, placid lake. I deserve compensation. At the very least, the captain should let me run a crap game so that I can make some money." The bosun spoke up. "Yesterday, the first mate called me a fruit, just because I like to do certain things in the closet. I have a right to do those things without being called names for it." "It's not only the humans that are mistreated on this ship," interjected an animal lover among the passengers, her voice quivering with indignation. "Why, last week I saw the second mate kick the ship's dog twice. One of the passengers was a college professor. Wringing his hands, he exclaimed, "All this is just awful. It's immoral. It's racism, sexism, speciesism, homophobia, and exploitation of the working class. It's discrimination. We must have social justice, equal wages for the Mexican sailor, higher wages for all sailors, compensations for the Indian, equal blankets for the ladies, a guaranteed right to perform any act, and no more kicking the dog." "Yes, yes," shouted the passengers. "Aye, aye," shouted the crew. "It's discrimination. We have to demand our rights. Whose streets? Our streets." The cabin boy cleared his throat. "You all have good reasons to complain, but it seems to me what we really have to do is get this ship turned around and headed back south, because if we keep going north, we're sure to be wrecked sooner or later. And then your wages, your blankets, and your right to perform acts in the closet won't do you any good. Because we'll all drown. We'll all be dead." But no one paid any attention to him, because he was only the cabin boy. The captain and the mates, from their first station on the poop deck, lol, poop deck, they had been watching and listening. Now they smiled and winked at one another, and a gesture from the captain to the third mate came down from the poop deck, sauntered over to where the passengers and crew were gathered, and shouldered his way amongst them. He put on a very serious expression on his face and spoke thusly. "We officers have to admit that some really inexcusable things have been happening on the ship. We hadn't realized how bad the situation was until we heard your complaints. We are men of goodwill and will do right by you, but, well, the captain is rather conservative and set in his ways and may have to be prodded a bit before he'll make any substantial changes. My personal opinion is if you protest vigorously, but always peacefully and without violating any of the ship's rules, you would shake the captain out of his inertia and force him to address the problems which you so justly complain of." Having said this, the third mate headed back toward the poop deck. As he went, the passengers and crew called after him, "Moderate, reformer, goody liberal, Captain Stooge." But they nevertheless did just what he said. They gathered in a body before the poop deck, shouted insults at the officers, and demanded their rights. "I want higher wages and better working conditions," cried the able seaman. "Equal blankets for women," cried the lady passenger. "I want to receive my orders in Spanish," cried the Mexican sailor. "I want the right to run a crap game," cried the Indian sailor. "I don't want to be called a fruit," cried the boatswain. "No more kicking the dog," cried the animal lover. "Revolution now," cried the professor. The captain and the mates huddled together and conferred for several minutes, winking, nodding, and smiling at each other all the while. The captain stepped to the front of the poop deck and with a great show of benevolence announced that the able seaman's wages would be raised to 6 shillings a month, the Mexican sailor's wages would be raised to 2/3 the wages of an Anglo seaman, and the order to reef the foresail would be given in Spanish. Lady passengers would receive 1 more blanket, the Indian sailor would be allowed to run a crap game on Saturday nights, and the boatswain wouldn't be called a fruit as long as he kept everything he did strictly private. And the dog wouldn't be kicked unless he did something really naughty, such as stealing food from the galley. The passengers and the crew celebrated these concessions as a great victory, but the next morning they were again feeling dissatisfied. 6 shillings a month is a pittance, and I still freeze me fingers when I reef the foresail, grumbled the able seaman. I'm still not getting the wages as the Anglos or enough food for this climate, said the Mexican sailor. We women still don't have enough blankets to keep us warm, said the lady passenger. The other crewmen and passengers voiced similar complaints, and the professor egged them on. When they were done, the cabin boy spoke up, louder this time so that the others could not easily ignore him. It's really terrible that the dog gets kicked for stealing a bit of bread from the galley, and that the women don't have equal banquets. equal blankets, and that the able seaman gets his fingers frozen, and I don't see why the bosun shouldn't do whatever he wants to, with whatever his partner of choice that is. But look how thick these icebergs are now, and how the wind blows harder and harder. We've got to turn the ship around south, because if we keep going north, we will wreck and drown.
Oh, yes, said the bosun. It's just so awful that we keep heading north. But why should I have to keep what I do in the closet? Why should I be called a fruit? Ain't I as good as everyone else? Sailing north is terrible, said the lady passenger. But don't you see? That's exactly why women need more blankets to keep them warm. I demand equal blankets for women now.
It's quite true, said the professor, that sailing to the north imposes great hardships on all of us. But changing course toward the south would be unrealistic. You can't turn back the clock. We must find a mature way of dealing with this situation.
Look, said the cabin boy, if we let those 4 madmen up on the poop deck have their way, we'll all be drowned. If we ever get the ship out of danger, then we can worry about working conditions, blankets for women, and the right to do whatever we want, even out of the closet. But first we've got to get this vessel turned around. If a few of us get together, it wouldn't take much. We make a plan, show some courage, we can save ourselves. It wouldn't take many of us. 6 or 8 would do. We could charge the poop, chuck those lunatics overboard, and turn the ship to the south. The professor elevated his nose and said sternly, I don't believe in violence. It's immoral. It's unethical ever to use violence, said the bosun. I'm terrified of violence, said the lady passenger. The captain and the mates had been watching and listening all the while. At the signal from the captain, the third mate stepped down to the main deck. He went about among the passengers and crew, telling them that there were still many problems on the ship. We have made much progress, he said, but much remains to be done. Working conditions for the able seamen are still hard. The Mexican still isn't getting the same wages as the Anglo. The women still don't have quite as many blankets as the men. The Indian Saturday night crap game is a paltry compensation for his lost lands, and it's unfair to the bosun that he should have to keep doing what he does in the closet. And the dog still gets kicked at times. I think the captain needs to be prodded again. If you would all put on just one more protest, as long as it remains nonviolent. As the third mate walked toward the stern, the passengers and the crew shouted insults after him, but they nevertheless did what he said and gathered in front of the poop deck for another protest. They ranted and raved and brandished their fists, and they even threw a rotten egg at the captain, which he skillfully dodged. After hearing their complaints, the captain and the mates huddled for a conference during which they winked and grinned broadly at one another. Then the captain stepped to the front of the poop deck and announced that the able seaman would be given gloves to keep his fingers warm. The Mexican sailor would receive wages equal to 3/4 the wages of the Anglo seaman. The women would receive yet another blanket. The Indian sailor could run a crap game on Saturday and Sunday nights. The bosun would be allowed to do what he does publicly after dark, and no one could kick the dog without special permission from the captain. The passengers and crew were ecstatic over the great revolutionary victory, but the next morning they were again feeling dissatisfied and began grumbling about the same old hardships. The cabin boy, this time, was getting angry. You goddamn fools! Don't you see what the captain and the mates are doing? They're keeping you occupied with your trivial, idiotic grievances about blankets and wages and the dog being kicked so that you won't think about what this really is wrong with this ship, that it's getting farther and farther to the north and we're all going to drown. If a few of you would come to your senses, get together, and charge with me to the poop deck, we could turn this ship around and save ourselves. But all you do is whine about petty little issues like working conditions and crap games and sex acts. The passengers and the crew were incensed. Petty, cried the Mexican. Do you think it's reasonable that I only get 3/4 the wages of an Anglo sailor? Is that petty? How can you call my grievance trivial? Said the bosun. Don't you know how humiliating it is to be called a fruit? Kicking the dog is not a petty little issue, screamed the animal lover.
It's heartless, cruel, and brutal. All right, then, answered the cabin boy. These issues are not petty and trivial. Kicking the dog is cruel and brutal, and it's humiliating to be called a fruit. But in comparison to our real problem, in comparison to the fact that the ship is still heading north, your grievances are petty and trivial, because if we don't get the ship turned around soon, we're all going to drown. Fascist, said the professor. Counter-revolutionary, said the lady passenger. And all the passengers and crew chimed in, one after another, calling the cabin boy a fascist and a counter-revolutionary. They pushed him away and went back to grumbling about wages and about blankets and the right to sex acts and how the dog was treated. The ship kept sailing north, and after a while, it was crushed between two icebergs, and everyone drowned. That's the Unabomber. You guys enjoy that one? What do you think? Good story? Good story? Well, I guess that's all the time we have for today.
It's been a great little bit of 3 hours with y'all, and Brother Joseph and I are quite happy to have had all your company. Well, enjoy the comments, some of the call-in people. You've been great. You know, I love you all, and God bless you. Got anything to say, Brother Joseph?
I just hope that everyone here is now enlightened and bathed in holy light as I have been for the past 3 hours. Completely and utterly beautiful.
My God's will becomes me. When he speaks through me. He has needs like I do. We both want to help you.
Transubstantiation Radio here on WFMU.
All right. Bless y'all, and y'all have a good night or good morning on your commute there. I'll see y'all in church, right?
Up next is Amanda Nazario with the Nazario Scenario, filling in for Kaylee.